Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, and you're kind enough to tune in to the Level Set. I'm here with the Mike Jones, political uh, superstar, and all around, and all around good guy. You can almost describe him like you would your favorite barber back in the 1950s. They did everything, bloodletting, style coach,
Well,
psychologist.
my father was a barber, Charles.
Yeah,
I mean, Larry. My
yeah,
father
I
was a
know,
barber.
I know, bloodletting, style coach, life coach, the whole thing. That's so I mean, he's second, third generation bloodletter. And then I'm here with the Dr. Charles Alexander, clinical psychologist, licensed psychologist, not running around here like some of my partners that are pastors running around calling themselves doctors. He earned his. And I'm attorney Larry Fields, and we want to talk about a few topics this week that we think are pertinent to our community. If you're watching this on YouTube, add comments. We look at the comments and we will respond to those as well. And we're on the Level Set on YouTube. And I want to open it up with no further delay with my bantering about Dr. Charles Alexander and I are both alums from Morehouse College. And last week, Dr. Alexander had the foresight to go to the graduation. Of course, it was his class reunion. I'll let him tell you the year out of vanity, Mike. And he saw. I'm not sure. We'll find out if he went to the graduation and saw Biden speak. I watched the entire. Speech of Biden as he addressed the Morehouse college grads, and I saw a number of my Morehouse was face the other way and refused to acknowledge his Biden's presence, and it brings up some issues that we want to talk about this morning as it relates to our community's interest and how to deal with these things and separating things. So I want to open the floor up to you, gentlemen, at this point, because we had a slight conversation that I think is pertinent about how to protect our interests, but call a thing at the same time. Dr. Alexander, please.
Uh, Good morning, gentlemen, and good morning, TV land. Uh, yes, I was able to attend um, activities and festivities last weekend. I graduated Morehouse in '89, so last weekend was my 35th class anniversary. And whereas I did attend activities with my class, um, I did not attend our class meeting because I was on the level set last Saturday while my class was meeting. uh, Nor did I attend the graduation. I watched the graduation on. I watched the graduation online, um, in part because uh, I disagree with the decision to invite Biden to start with, and the other part was that I just wasn't gonna work hard to get a ticket to go line up at 6 in the morning for a 9 or 10 o'clock event. And so that just didn't make sense to me. So instead, I worked out and listened to it online. But um, I want to do a mashup on a couple of things. So last week we had planned to speak in depth on Malcolm, as last week was his birthday weekend, I believe. Um, but I think Malcolm is still in order, uh, because just as 64 was the year of the Ballad of the Bullet, so is 24. And so, you know, what as with many things that we talk about on here, when you get to the content of the battle of the ballot or the bullet, you find that most people haven't listened to that speech. They know the title of it. They're intrigued by the title. Um, they're probably intrigued by a few riffs, but they don't really know conceptually what Malcolm was talking about. And what Malcolm was talking about in 1964 were genocide, voting rights, um, Black nationalism, and um, and the alleged distinction between the Democratic Party and the Dixiecrats. That's what he was talking about. And here we find ourselves in 24 talking about genocide, voting rights, an alleged difference between and the filibuster. He was talking about the filibuster, and here we are talking about those same things, and you know the we we struggle. We continue to struggle with being able to um, contextualize and benefit from history. Um, we struggle. I understanding uh, concepts such as Black nationalism, which Malcolm spoke very, he just very clear about what it was, and wasn't what it was, and what it wasn't in that speech. And we still struggle to control our politics, and and Biden being at Morehouse is a is a prime example, and people continually feeling the need to defend this guy because we don't know the difference between we don't know the difference between the president, the party, and our interests. And Larry, you asked me about mental health before we came on. That is a prime example of our mental illness, is that we don't know what's good for us. That's fundamental to mental health. And so that's where I'm at.
Charles, I don't have your expertise in obviously mental health and the psychology of the human species. So I take a little bit different tack. It was some work I wanted to do and never got around to it. When you write, you have these ideas, and it's kind of like being a songwriter. You kind of say, yeah, this is a piece I want to get back to. And I developed this thought, but it speaks to the problem that you just raised. And I just thought this idea. I think one of the reasons we struggle with reality, our children struggle in school, is because we don't have a Black aesthetic, an intellectual based aesthetic that helps you, that explains the world to you. And I thought about it the more I got into Douglass. Frederick Douglass is probably the most profound public figure in the 19th century, including Abraham Lincoln. He literally is at the top of that, independent of race or anything else. And when you read Douglass, we talk about him, but we don't teach him. He's framing issues in the 19th century that are fundamental to us today. And then I started to think about jazz and Louis Armstrong and all of that, how that is so fundamental to the music. And from a Douglass grows other people. Without, there's no Du Bois if there's no Douglas. You don't get to Du Bois without Douglas. You can't get to the Duke Ellington or Charlie Parker without Louis Armstrong. And there's a whole platform. And it came to me that if we created and curated a Black intellectual aesthetic, you could teach world history, the human experience, to Black children and teach every educational skill you need in school using a Black aesthetic, a Black interpretation of reality, because that's all you get in school anyway, is somebody's interpretation of how they understand this moment came into being. Our problem, whether it's a mental health issue or intellectual and political issue, is we are using somebody else's lens to understand and see the world. So it's like I wear glasses. We all wear glasses. And when you go get your eyes tested again, they check, they run the lens through and they say, let me just see if this was better, if that was better, till they get a prescription that works for you. They don't give you somebody else's glasses and say, well, these work for X, so they ought to work for you. No, I'm going to sit here and we're going to take you through this and we're going to get you a pair of glasses that are prescribed for you that will help you see what you're looking at the best possible. And I think metaphorically or analogies, whichever it is, that's our intellectual challenge. And then going back to Douglas again, we've talked about this about 3 weeks ago. Frederick Douglass's speech at the Lincoln in the 1870s about Lincoln and that monument basically is the existential reality of us and white politicians in America. That literal speech about what he said about Lincoln and who Lincoln is, that ain't never changed, man. You ain't got to worry about Biden. Let me teach you what Douglas said about Lincoln. And that tells you everything you'll ever need to know about Joe Biden.
But there's an avocation that we even have the power to make a white politician do something in favor of us. Even when we've been successful, instead of us, surrounding ourselves or basking in some of the power moves that we've made, we want to put that on the gratitude of white folks. And so I think that continues to be a situation that even when Biden does something, or any white politician, they do something in our favor, we fail to see, as we've been talking about on this show, the interest conversion. We fail to see that. It's in their best interest to do that because we've got the power to flex there. But Mike, to your point, it seems like there was even if you want to say a loose Black think tank with Carter G. Woodson, James Weldon Johnson, all of the writers that converged in the Renaissance period, that was specifically set up for the interest of Black folks. In my opinion, we do not have a Black think tank. We got people working on the weekends trying to liberate Black folks. And that ain't the way this works, man.
And Larry, and I agree that for some reason I must have got that memo from the ancestors this morning because I was thinking about some stuff that you and Charles have just raised. My point about Douglas and Lincoln is Douglas is really saying in that speech, I know why we got to be here. And I know why this statue looks the way it looks. But let's us be clear about who the white man is. Okay. So that, as the kids we used to say, don't get it twisted though. Okay. Our problem is we no longer understand what Douglas was clear about. And part of the reason we don't understand because we don't know Douglas anymore. See, everybody that you're talking about in that era, from Woodson to Du Bois to the writers and thinkers of the Renaissance, even into the 50s and the 60s, when we had Black intellectual journals, the Negro Digest, Black Scholar, these writers and thinkers were grounded in the Black experience intellectually by the Black thinkers that came before them. It's like jazz musicians saying, yeah, it's 2024 and I'm Christian Scott or Russell Gunn.
You froze, Mike. Okay.
Well, as we wait on them to come back in, yes, and that you know that Douglas piece at the commemoration of Lincoln and the event towards his memorial or what have you, that really kind of speaks to where we are. Douglas is very clear. He says he's not our guy, and yes, he issued the Emancipation, and yes, he he allowed us to fight for our freedom, and yes, we were ultimately able you know to suppress the insurrection of the slave stocracy. But he was definitively the white man's president. That's who he was, and that's what Douglas said, and that's who Joe Biden is. But we struggle with this concept because he's a Democrat at all, and we're unable to separate the two. And Mike, you said that you don't know the psychology stuff like I know it, but really you just said it. What you just said exactly what it is. It's the ability to do to do reality testing. That's mental health. Is your ability to deal with reality, to deal with life on life's own terms. And we are struggling with that. We are struggling with that. But I'll also add that and Larry, your reference to to Carter G or to Du Bois or again back to Fred. We don't understand what those brothers were saying. Again, just like when we revisited Du Bois a few weeks ago. I mean, folks are still arguing the talented 10th. Du Bois said he was wrong.
He abandoned that himself.
He said, I misread it. I misunderstood, I misunderstood, the assignment. I thought different of what I was seeing. And ultimately those folks were self-serving. And so what we need to do is XYZ. And so, but we still got people arguing that point, despite the fact that he, on the front end of it, before he even wrote his talented 10, he said, words well spoken. That's what he said. And so we don't understand that. We don't understand that the miseducation of the Negro is a critique of educated Black folks. We don't understand that.
But Charles, if I may, the reason we don't understand because we don't know. And the reason we don't know because we don't study. Okay.
We don't study.
So we
And
can't
historic.
have this conversation about how this theory evolved. And
Mhm.
and so if we let's stay with the jazz metaphor, because my online problems being in and out, jazz is a perfect metaphor for what happened is because I laid down a line and I got cut off and you picked and I came back. By the time I got back in, I could follow where because you just picked it up and kept going with it. The reality is that's how we should be. This is what Douglas said then. The idea, the existential idea, is probably a permanent reality. The question becomes for the intellectual, what does that moment look like now? What does that idea look like in this moment? Just like ultimately what you're doing with the improvised solo is the concepts that Louis Armstrong created in the Hot Lick 5 and 7, 1925, 1927, when he was in Chicago. The question is, what does that sound like? What does that construct sound like in 2024? So you ain't playing with literally what Louis Armstrong played, but you're taking that architecture, that musical superstructure, and says, this is what I did with it. I stayed true to the essence of what he gave me. And then this is my interpretation in this moment. Because jazz evolves, and we ain't classical musician people. We don't repeat the same thing that somebody else plays.
We're not
I
sheet
hear
music.
what
We're
you
not sheet
played.
music people.
Right. I hear what you played, and then I say, this is what I heard. Okay, this is what I heard. And then I add to that body of work. And somebody comes after me and they play me, they listen to me, they listen to you, and say, this is what I've taken from that. And we evolve. We don't have an intellectual appreciation of our culture and aesthetically what that means and what it has contributed to the world. And we think we are unworthy. We got to keep proving to white folks that we're worthy.
Mm-hmm.
Since I'm glad this is a podcast, you can, at the intellectual level, you can say fuck them. I mean, especially American white intellectuals. Now, there's a European, or I'll call it a Western aesthetic that is legitimate, but it ain't even purely European and white. It's Mediterranean. I mean, it's Near Eastern. Because my brother and I were talking about that. You can't teach Western civilization without teaching about North Africa, Islam, and because in the larger Western aesthetic, all of that's in there. You wouldn't have mathematics without Arabs because they invented zero. There's nothing you could do with Roman numerals, nothing from a mathematical standpoint. So the world is fairly integrated and has always been. And we have contributed that, but our experience in America and how we thought about it and written about it is legit. And you could teach it. And in teaching that history, that story, that perspective, you could teach every skill set a child needs to have in order to be successful, quote, and pass the test. But they will come out with a totally, completely different worldview. Matter of fact, if we had not failed so bad educationally, there would be nobody Black talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. You wouldn't even care about that. You wouldn't care. put it like this. You know, and I'm dating myself. White people love the Temptations, but didn't nobody black care if anybody white liked Motown because it was our stuff. It wasn't our stuff for them. It was ours that they came to. And the beautiful thing about somebody like the Temptations, any of them brothers, nobody changed Miles Bird. Nobody changed who they were, what they were doing to make their music accessible to white people. White people had to come to their music because their music was not changing to accommodate them. And if you can understand it and get with it, you become Stan Getz, Dave Brubeck, or a lot of extraordinary white musicians. But you playing in this space. I'm not playing in your space. And that's the premise of our existence that we're missing. We're not developing and defining our space. And to quote Miles, when people would say, well, I don't know if I understand that or I don't like what you're doing, Miles had one position. If you don't like it, don't listen to it, period. Okay? Because I ain't playing it for you no way. I played it for me. And that's how we ought to come at this work. This is the universe as I understand. Whether you see it like that or not, that's on you. But I'm not making it an adjustment to my reality to make you comfortable. I don't owe you that.
I think that's part of a major part of the problem, and we can stay on Motown for that. That is exactly where they started. But I think as you saw the evolution of, and it's documented in this great book called The Black Culture Industry, that chronicles Black entertainment all the way back from Black-owned minstrel troops all the way through, I think, all the way through Prince's challenges with his record company. But towards the end of the heyday of Motown, Berry Gordy attempted to try and cross over acts. He did, and I think that was his demise, because as long as he stayed where he was, people came to him. He wanted to make Marvin Gaye the Black Frank Sinatra. Imagine that. And I'm a Frank Sinatra fan. I think the work that Frank Sinatra did with my frat brother, as a matter of fact, is unparalleled. I think that what they did, I have a live disc set with them, and it's phenomenal. But you don't need to add any of those things, and I think that's where we are now. And specifically this weekend, I watched the light, as he's been described, the light white nationalist Bill Maher's show, and he had one of our public intellectuals that fancies himself as, he's the only man I've ever heard say, I'm a pretty smart guy, and he had him on to translate the drums, if you will, in the Kendrick Lamar and Drake back and forth. And this public intellectual goes on and attempts to decode for white America what has just transpired. And I think that is where we
Who
are.
was it? Eric Michael Dyson?
Yes, it was Eric Michael Dyson. Goes on Bill Maher, and
That's
Bill
his
Maher,
favorite decoder.
what'd you say?
That's his favorite decoder, ain't it?
Well, he mentioned several decoders. He said, when I need to get, when I need a leg up on hip hop, I call you and Killer Mike. So yeah, I think he's in his top two, but maybe Killer Mike was busy trying to help the governor of Georgia do some things apparently. But that's where we are. These public intellectuals. I mean, I sent you all probably been 2 or 3 years ago an article that was titled "What Are the Drums Saying," which was a riff on the Tarzan movies when the natives would be speaking to each other in drums that the colonizers couldn't understand. So they would always have a black native that they would upon they would press upon to tell them what the natives were saying. And I be John Brown if that didn't just occur now, which bowls directly with what Du Bois said, is these people are aggrandizing, and that there is no talented tenth because these people they're only looking for their own interests.
Absolutely. And and again, I mean, like quick thought on Bill Maher and Michael Eric Dyson. We ain't got nothing better to do than to worry about why Drake and Kendrick Lamar are like it is not a is there no more pressing issue before the United States, before black people in the United States than Kendrick Lamar and Drake? I
Yeah.
mean, this
It,
stuff
it's mind
is
blowing. It's mind.
is mind blowing now.
Mind
And so
blowing.
the thing is that I can sit and I can listen for hours for folks telling me about these kids today. Bill Maher wasn't talking to no kids, and so it's adults who are concerned about Kendrick Lamar and Drake. It was adults who was concerned when Will Smith tried to knock out Chris Rock. It was these are adults, right? And allegedly they thinking adults. And so we have, you know, even in this madness with Sean Combs, we don't we don't really care about the impact of domestic violence in our community. We care about Sean Combs. If we cared about the impact of domestic violence, we wouldn't gorge on domestic violence. Every show black people watch is predicated on that. And so, or crime otherwise.
We
And
mentioned
so
trauma porn. We love trauma porn.
we love it. And um, and we love we love the imagery. We love, and again, in much the same way that we can't figure out, in much the same way that we needed Douglas to tell us um, that Lincoln ain't our guy, in much the same way that we need somebody to tell us that Biden ain't our guy. We need somebody to tell us that we ain't the streets. But all of this kind of gets to our reality testing.
Say that
The,
again, man, with your full chest. That's something that needs to be underscored. Please.
I mean, these things, and just as Mike was talking about, our aesthetic, we've decided that we all in on all of this, we just all in on the degradation. We all in on that. Like that's what it means to be black. Not the foundations, of civilization and high culture, but the streets. Right. And so we busy ourselves, in this madness. So you got more folks right now, trying to figure out, well, if this is how, Sean Combs treated this woman, well, then maybe that's what happened to that other sister. What? This, this is what this is what you got now. Again, if you want to talk about domestic violence, then let's talk about domestic violence. Let's talk about saving, the sister or the children or even the husband or the people that who are suffering and experiencing and living in trying times who need help. We ain't trying to help where we can help, right? And that gets these kind of things. They get to our lack of reality testing. Because again, what Malcolm said in The Ballad of the Bullet, you can't seek justice from the criminal. You can't. And so this is what we do. And so when we see these things going on around us, instead of us coalescing and trying to address the issues at the level at which we can, we ask white folks to come in and help because we think that they're white. We think that they know. And as you were saying, Larry, that when we bring value, you know, once we even come to grips with the whole concept of interest convergence, we then say they did it, not us, right? And so, we go back to Lincoln. Black folks think that Lincoln came on the scene and was like, you know what? We need to emancipate. we need to do away with slavery. As if he created the Republican Party. We just don't know. We don't, but we don't endeavor to know. We're busy with Drake and the other little cat. That's what we're busy doing.
And and and
Kendrick.
and no one is going to tell you about Moses Dixon, who prior to the Civil War had gone around the country and trained batteries of black men. His goal was to have an army of 40,000 to take our freedom. And it is reported, and I have not found that speech, but I wouldn't be surprised either of you two. But there's a speech in which Lincoln states that we would have lost the war with had it not been for the bondmen, and he was specifically talking about Moses Dixon, and those individuals that joined, on the side of Lincoln's so-called army, and overtook the Confederates. So I mean, we won't even take credit for that. We continue to believe that this was an act of benevolency from America, and it's never been that.
My brothers, this is the thought that came to me earlier, and I think metaphorically and maybe literally, I'm going to use it as the cause of our predicament. There are, there are people, there are preachers, and Black folks who are church folks believe that if you pray, God will provide you an answer to the question. My theory of the universe is that the universe or God provides you the answer before you ever got the question. That the answer is always here. You just got to know what the question is. And it's your experience that creates the question. And if you discipline your mind, you'll find the answer because the answer is there. So for me, and this is about, because we have been infected with the virus of the American character. That means we're intellectually superficial, we're not deep thinkers, and we enjoy being actively ignorant because that's American. That's the American character.
Mike, that is a statement that I think we are going to have to, I mean, we got to spend more time on instances where we are motivated to remain actively ignorant. I made note of that this week, man, and there are just more instances of that. It's almost as if that is the mode of operation of America.
But what I was doing, what the preachers do, I was sitting up.
Yeah, go ahead. No, no, go ahead. I know, but I didn't want to lose that. I wanted to put a pin up. So I'm gonna do like the preachers and put a pin in that.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
Yeah, put a pin in that.
But I would suggest that the answer to why we are today was provided to us 100 years ago by one of the ancestors. And we repeat it regularly because we regularly sing it. You can't get us together about nothing that we won't. Everybody stand up and sing. We make white folks stand up and sing with us, okay? And ain't none of us listening to what we're saying or what somebody else is singing and we're listening. So here's why we are where we are. Lest our feet stray from the places our God where we met thee. Lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Those two sentences explain why we are where we are. We strayed from the path that the ancestors set. We became drunk with the wine of this world and we forgot. So we got to sober up and find the path again because the path is still there. And us looking for tricks and white folks got the answers, or if we just get rich. And think about it like this. All of us are products of working class families by and large. There might be a few that ain't. And even those of us who ain't working class no more, in theory, your parents were. And really, we all working class. We just brothers with good jobs. We ain't working real hard, but fundamentally, and maybe you got a profession, but you still got to show up for work every day. Okay, so you ain't wealthy because you can't do nothing and get a check. That's what it means to be wealthy. That you don't have to put in effort. You got return on capital. And if you think about what and leadership always has to come from the middle class because the middle class are the only people with the educational skills and the time and resources to actually provide leadership. If you punch in a clock, you don't get a chance to be no community leader. And if you think about it, the Black political agenda is about minority business participation, corporate advancement, and intergenerational wealth creation. Now that's probably an agenda for upper middle class, college educated professionals and their children. That's not an agenda for working class people, which is what most Black people are. So I want you to pause and think for a moment. When is the last time in the last 25 years, maybe 30 years, where you've heard a Black political leader or public leader of any stature talk about jobs, how affordable housing, education, and safety for Black people in their neighborhoods? The Black pundits, the Black politicians that they interview, they can use up hours of television time. Ain't nobody on the TV but them. And you can't get them to talk about that. And they wonder why Black people are disconnected when they say what we got to do. Because the we they talking about ain't them. You talking about your shit. You ain't talking about me. I need a job. I don't need generational wealth. Okay. I'm trying to get, I ain't trying to get my kid to Harvard. I'm trying to get him out of high school so he can go to the University of Missouri. Okay. And then maybe my grandkid can get to Harvard. Okay. So if they didn't know brothers in Harvard, I wouldn't care if we could all get in the University of Missouri or Kansas State or whatever, or whatever it is. I would trade that. They can have Harvard if I can have well-funded HBCUs and access to public higher education, because that would do more good for Black people. If we never had a Black CEO at a Fortune 500 company, but half the people who worked at General Motors was Black, making $40 an hour, I'll trade that. And our political problem is the agenda that's been created by the Black leadership class has no relationship to the needs
Other people.
of the Black working class. There is your political problem, my brother.
That is absolutely it. And and so two things. I was a grown ass man before I knew that James Weldon Johnson was uh, a freedom fighter. I just thought he was a guy that wrote this song. I had no idea that, you know, he was fighting for the liberation of Black folks. Because again, it's it's not how we're taught. That you get that as a function of individual study. You know, like this thing that folks like to say, what autodidactic, right? So, but he, being a man from the South, knew the same thing that David Walker knew, and and the same thing that Frederick Douglass knew. That, you know, like if you read Frederick Douglass, you know, he distinguishes between the religion of the South, that and that which, you know, think he refers to Jesus. That these are different things, right? And so, to the point, so the lyrics of the song, we have strayed from the Creator, and we follow white folks, and so we get what we get. If we'd have stayed on the path, this thing might look different. But we strayed because we follow white folks who come bearing gifts. And those gifts, they're usually not in our best interest. And that has been the nature of things. That has been the nature of things. And it continues to be the nature of things. Because we struggle to be able to understand and clarify um, the realities, the history of this struggle, the current realities, and based on the history and the current realities, what we can anticipate in the future. Like, we don't benefit from film study. I don't even know that we watch the film. We, in between games, I think we just rest. And then we show up and be ready to play the next day, you know.
As a
And
psychologist, though, Doc, with respect to the trauma that we've had epigenetically, how much of that is triggering for us? And I mean, in terms of us watching film and dealing with
I am so tired of the phrase triggering. I hate it.
okay, so is there a better phrase that we can use?
I mean, everything, so we don't study because we don't study.
Okay.
That's why we don't study.
So
And
it's
so
this is
study. So that goes back to our content. Reading history can't be triggering if if you can watch Empire and you can watch Power, and if that doesn't cause your sympathetic nervous system to go to 10, I'm not quite sure why you can't read and study.
so I
So
if you can watch those things, you should be able to watch 12 Years a Slave and get
you should plus.
some
It's plus.
entry point into how we got here.
Absolutely. And so the whole thing is it's a lie. So we ain't reading it because we ain't reading and we don't decide not to read and not to watch because it is allegedly triggering. We decide not to read and not to watch because again, because we haven't studied at all, we're only in touch with whatever aspects of those things are stigmatizing or embarrassing to us otherwise. If the issue was when I watch 12 Years a Slave, my blood pressure go up or my sugar get crazy, then you wouldn't watch none of this other foolishness you watch either. You
I
wouldn't
wouldn't
read
watch
none of
the
this other
Power
foolishness.
series. I wouldn't watch the Power
You'd
series.
be done with all of that stuff.
Uh-huh.
Uh, uh, I'll give you an example. And even when we do watch, we really don't know what we're looking at.
We don't know what we're looking at.
It would be like going to a play, going to see Hamlet, and you think Hamlet is about the uncle and the mama killing the brother, and all of that. Then somebody gets part, all of that. No, it ain't. It's really a play about treachery and indecision, because ultimately Hamlet's indecision about what he needed to do in that moment is what created all that chaos by the end. Macbeth is a play about the price of ambition. That's what Shakespeare is right. Same way with Julius Caesar. Now, you could look at The Wire and you could see some street thugs selling drugs, shooting people. Or you could listen to the dialogue sometime between the Avon and the Stringer. Like when Stringer is talking about, here's where we at, man. Why we need to do this like this anymore. We don't need to do that. We can just put the money out there, make the money work. We sit back. By the time the government come looking for us, they can't do nothing because we straight. And Stinger is right. You can do that. But Avon puts to him a different question. He says, you mean run this like businessmen? Stringer say, yeah. Avon says, but I ain't no suit wearing businessman like you. I'm just a gangster, I suppose. And I want my corners. Now, let's take that dialogue up to another level. If you teaching it as opposed to listening to it, you got the brother saying, look, America is okay. We done broke through. We don't have to do what we used to have to do. We can do it like this. And the other brother who's still connected to who he is and how he got to this moment say, I hear you, But I don't think that's who I am. I'm not that. And I choose not to be that. This is who I am, and this is who I'm staying. So if you're teaching, if you're using the why as a teaching to you elevate that conversation to an existential conversation about who are you, who do you choose to be? And I'm putting it in a language and a context that you might be more familiar with so I can explain to you and we can discuss a more complex issue. But if you ain't got nothing in your head, if the people that teach you English can't tell you why 500 years later people still read Shakespeare's tragedies and probably every major plot in any drama some is a ripoff of Shakespeare because he deals with the fundamental elements of people and their flaws, particularly when they have power.
Well, I mean, and what you just explained was applications of Shakespeare anyway.
Right.
And that's, I mean, which is the same thing that you did earlier when, before you gave the preface of what you didn't know with respect to Charles's discipline. Those are applications. And that's the highest level of learning. Because, there's not a corporation in the world that doesn't want their corners. There's not a politician in the world that doesn't want his or her corners.
Right.
So, I mean, that's just as basic as it gets. And what we fail to do is to give credence once again to the lessons that we know. You know that sells in every single discipline.
But I don't know if we know it to his whole point that
We've lived it, but we don't. You're right. You are right.
You don't make these
You don't
connections.
make the connection.
And
You've
so
lived it and feel it, but you don't make the connection.
so I was asked some years ago to do like 15, 20 minutes on human trafficking. And when I finished, somebody raised their hand. They was like, so you talking about that stuff that happened like overseas, like in the movie Taken? Like, Chicago is the hub of human trafficking. Folks in Chicago think human trafficking is something that happens that Liam Neeson fights in Europe somewhere. People could watch The Wire and have no idea that what happens in The Wire happens in Joliet, Illinois, happens in Chicago, happens in Memphis, happens in St. Louis. It happens in port cities because that's what you can do with logistics. We don't understand none of it. None of it. If you can get cars, TVs, if you can get stuff in and out, you can get stuff in and out. You can get anything in and out. And that was one of the other biggest things that you can learn from watching The Wire is the import of logistics. What does it mean to live, near, that Baltimore harbor? You can get stuff in and out, cars, drugs, guns, and people, which is the same thing you can get in St. Louis, which is I live near the intermodal for trains in the southern part of Cook County. Joliet is the largest inner harbor in the country, largest intermodal harbor in the country. You can get anything out of here, which is why the Sinaloa cartel is based in Chicago. They show black people get shot in Chicago every day. Sinaloa runs Chicago. You don't never hear about Mexicans getting killed in Chicago. How can a Sinaloa cartel operate here and there'll be no crime in Little Village? That is crazy. But we watch this garbage on TV, but we don't watch it. We watch everything we do, we do for entertainment. We don't do a whole lot. We don't do a whole
Discerningly.
lot because we try to understand,
Wow.
right? And so that's that that's the challenge. And so again, this is where we are. And so back to the beginning. Joe Biden again on Sunday, he said, "I was inspired by Dr. King." Like that's how he got into Congress, because Dr. King was assassinated. On Monday or Tuesday, he then threatens the chief judge of the international uh what do you call it, the International Criminal Council or whatever, because they're going to bring charges
Against
against
Nat and Benji, baby.
against
Against Benji.
Netanyahu and Hamas.
Mhm.
And again, we don't understand. We don't understand. We think Hamas is Palestine. Hamas is the Panthers. They're not a nation. Hamas started off as a student group that Israel started to fund because they was trying to upstage the PLO. That's how this started. Now, because they haven't cut themselves off from the Arab world, they can get support. And so they can actually fight a guerrilla fight against an Israel, that's a proxy for the United States. Even if we wanted to have a fight, we couldn't. Because we really believe that if we start a fight, we could still go to Bass Pro Shop and get bullets. We believe that. We don't know that every city has a perimeter within which 90% of Black people live. Nor do we know that that model is predicated on the model that was established for St. Louis. There's not a place that Black folks live that if they shut down the highway, that it ain't gonna look like Gaza. Shut down the highway, that's it. Nothing in, nothing out. Everywhere. Not a single city. Just everywhere you don't call it the perimeter. Atlanta might be the only place that they actually call it the perimeter. So we live it. We live this stuff every day and have no idea what we're living. We don't understand that today is this is the exact same thing that this you listen to that speech. Malcolm is talking about the exact same thing in 64 as we're looking at in 24. 60 years, a lifetime, and the thing hasn't changed. And our voting rights are still tenuous at best. Right. And we got Black folks defending this guy, much the same way as Black folks was telling Dr. King, "Oh, you can't, don't be saying that stuff about President Johnson." You got Negroes.
Vietnam.
Yeah. And so, Vietnam, we got Palestine. Right? The Panthers was the first. It was the Panthers. It wasn't the hippies. It wasn't the hippies that was talking about, hell no, we won't go. It was the Panthers who started that. Anti-war protests, that was the Panthers. And SNCC, it was actually SNCC and the Panthers. If we do it in order, it was SNCC, then the Panthers. Because it really kind of centers around Stokely and whoever was running around with him. So it starts with SNCC, gets with the Panthers, but it gets to Dr. King because of those students. They pushed Dr. King, and Dr. King was very clear about that. Same, the dynamics are exact same. And
Charles,
Mhm.
if I may. And the other thing that Martin Luther King always was intellectually honest and consistent. And he said, I can't believe what I say I believe and be who I say I am and maintain this kind of contradiction. So I am compelled to be, in order to be consistent with me, to reconcile who I am to this moment. And that means I got to be against this war, because that's the only moral position that's available to me. And there are people who are not up to that like he was. But I would always hope that you were intellectually grounded enough, intelligent enough, smart enough to understand that that's the issue, whether you're up to it or not.
Mm-hmm.
And for the people who have the courage and the ability to meet the moment, you say, I ain't tough enough I ain't good enough to go with you. But I understand why you're going. Somebody need to go, and I got your back. You ain't gonna never have to worry about me behind you, cause I understand. I just ain't built with the same moral fiber or strength that you are, but I understand.
And that contradiction that he said he couldn't do, that he couldn't live with, that he ultimately had to take, the moral, he had to take the moral high ground, right? The moral position. Morehouse has literally compromised himself in that regard by bringing this guy in here, who is, the commander in chief of genocide. That's who he is, right? And so, but this just becomes again just another one of those things. And the whole point of the ballot and the bullet is that the two parties run neck and neck, and they really the same people, and you know we have the potential to swing the ballot or the balance, through the ballot, but it requires that we be an educated and informed voting public. That's what it requires. And
So, and having said that, how should this election play out for our community? I mean, what is the best?
Every election, we should be voting our interest.
Okay.
We vote individuals. We are very, very connected to individuals. And another funny thing about Joe Biden is, we so scared of Trump that, you know, like we take the guy who co-wrote the crime bill and say he for us.
Are you advocating that we need to give Trump a look?
No, I'm not. I'm in the same place I was when we were talking about Lincoln. He ain't our guy. The platform is ours. The platform is in our interest. The platform predates Joe Biden. The Republican Party was founded as a non-slavery party before there was a Lincoln. Lincoln didn't bring that to the party. That was the purpose of the party. The party started in 54 or 56, somewhere in there. After the Kansas-Nebraska Act, they started moving white folks in there trying to flip Missouri and Kansas. Lincoln came up after that. We associate emancipation with Lincoln as if he was the person that was driving that. Black folks been rebelling in the United States since 1500s. We didn't need white folks to teach us to be free. We've been fighting since we got here. We fought who, regardless who was the president, we was fighting. Had to convince that clown to let us fight. He only said we could fight because he was getting his butt kicked.
He's getting dusted off.
And the day before he signed the Emancipation Proclamation, he signed a contract to have us exported,
Right.
to have us deported.
Right.
He didn't want us here. And we keep thinking he's a da-da-da-da-da-da. Even though Douglas told us he was not our guy. He's definitively the white man's president. That's what Douglas said. And we're in the same place today. And so when you had this conversation today, simple-minded people will say, well, so what you saying, Trump? What? What are you talking about? No, I'm not saying Trump. What I am saying is we have a.
Did you just call me simple-minded?
Not necessarily.
But
if you took it as that, you know.
No, because I just asked you. I just asked you. I know where you're going. I know where you're going. I just want the point clear.
So why are you doing that?
Wait a minute.
I want the point clear. I want it very, very clear what the point is, because if you listen to your sound bites, you could assume that you're one of these clowns that's saying I'm sitting this election out. That's not what you're doing. No, it's not what I'm saying. No, it's not what you're advocating. So I just want that point clear. So
you know what, Chuck, for a minute there, I thought we was in Goodfellas. Do I amuse you? Am I?
well, he couldn't have said that to me, because I would have told him, yeah, you do amuse me. Yeah, you are funny to me.
Yeah, I thought we was about to have a joke. I thought we was about to have a Joe Pesci moment. Okay.
No. I know exactly where he's going, and I know where he stands on it. I just want it very, very clear here where he stands on it.
Yes. It's like,
because he's, unlike one of our classmates, he's not advocating not voting in the presidential election.
No.
He's not advocating voting for Trump. He's advocating voting for the platform that we espouse, that's going to be in our best interest, at the same time acknowledging that this guy is not our guy and that you're not going to be able to vote and drive off.
Or to quote a profound group of artists, Public Enemy, don't believe the hype.
Don't believe the hype.
And fight the powers that be.
Fight, and he's a part of those powers that we gotta fight. And in so fact,
what you're doing is doing him a favor. You're doing him a bigger favor than most people, because you're saying, even though like Freeway, even though what we do is wrong, we still got to roll with this guy.
Well, wait a minute. Here is, I'll give you a historical example. 1920s, 1930s, there's a huge civil war in China. They're the revolutionary forces of the Chinese Communist Party, led by Mao Zedong. There's a right-wing reactionary Chinese Kuomintang government led by Chiang Kai-shek. And they fighting all over China, have been for 10, 15 years. The Japanese invade China and basically occupy large sections of it. The United States finds itself obviously at war with Japan in Asia after Pearl Harbor. So the question that Mao faced in the late 1930s, well, what do we do? We got the Japanese over here. We got our enemy, the Chinese nationalists, the Kuomintang, backed by the American imperialists over there. So we ain't got no friends or allies in this. But we can't do nothing in China till we get the Japanese out. And this is where our interests align with the American interests that will also keep Chiang Kai-shek in line because they need to beat the Japanese too. So there was an alliance in World War II that the Chinese communists led by Mao Zedong partnered with Chiang Kai-shek's reactionary government sponsored by the Americans to defeat the Japanese. And the alliance worked. And it lasted up until Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Okay. When the war was over, literally the next week, Mao went back to kicking Chiang Kai-shek in the ass. Period. And in 1948, they ran them off of the mainland of China, and Mao instituted or created the People's Republic of China in 1948. And Chiang Kai-shek was on with, and the only reason he could stay on Taiwan is because Mao didn't have a navy. He didn't have no way to get there, and the United States had the Seventh Fleet. So, since the United States was the preeminent hegemon after World War II, they created a political fiction that the real Chinese government was Chiang Kai-shek on Taiwan and not Mao Zedong in Beijing. And it lasted for about 20 years, and then it collapsed. And Richard Nixon, of all people, was the one that said there's one China, which the Chinese knew and the rest of the world knew, by the way, because everybody wasn't where the United States was, just like everybody ain't where the United States is in Palestine. But basically said there's one China and the government is in Beijing, period. Now, they still maintain this protectorate for Taiwan. And what people need to understand about the Chinese is China as a unit. China is easily 5,000 years old, but as a solitary country made up the idea of China, which literally translates into Middle Kingdom. That's how they think of themselves. It's 3,000 years old. There are 3,000 years of written history about China. Their position is just like the British in Shanghai. When the British said, well, we don't want to leave, the Chinese said, you're going to have to leave Shanghai because you can't stay on the mainland with a British protection because we ain't going to have that. He said, how much? And the British said, well, we can't leave right now. And the Chinese said, how much time you need? He said, we need 50 years. The Chinese said, you got it. Because for them, we 3,000 years old, man. What the hell is 50 years? All you need is 50 years. If that case, we can start making plans now. So the point is, the arc of human history is long. And if you're dumb enough, shallow enough to think this moment is the only moment, then you're a fool. That not being informed with the context of how this moment arrives and what are the possibilities that could happen. Because the one reality, and here's the Democratic, as I see it, here's the problem that Biden and establishment Democrats and their Black enablers have. They ain't trying to figure out how to beat Trump. They're trying to figure out how to maintain some cohesive white tribe. Because if this was just about politics, you would abandon them white folks and say, my political interest is over here with these Black folks, brown folks, the LGBT community, all these others, okay? And them 75 million people that voted for Trump, which is still a mind-blowing thing for me on point when he was reelected. He said, I got to write them off, okay?
And that's the thing, right? Ain't that a real thing, Mike Jones? Them
Oh, hell
70
yeah.
million people, that's a real thing. And we
That's a
keep
real
saying
thing.
stupid stuff like Trump crazy. There's 70 million people
Wait,
who believe in this guy.
75.
and that's probably over half the white population of America, because the minorities, black, brown, and yellow, who made up that 75 million, are statistically insignificant.
Yes, and we get all caught up in that foolishness. And it's like that is a real thing. And
Right.
so while this guy is chasing after these people, you know, who literally are already gone,
They're gone.
he chasing after these people as opposed to, which is what Malcolm is talking about in Battle of the Bullet. Ballot or the bullet is we gotta have an informed
but if
we
you
gotta
Joe
have an
Biden,
informed voting block.
Joe Biden is a 81-year-old white man, and
From
he is
Delaware.
traumatized by the same thing that them other white folks are traumatized. What would it mean if if white folks no longer have the optimum leverage, or no longer have the power imperatives in America? There goes the privilege. And I mean, matter of fact, you're redefining what it means to be an American after 240 years of the American Republic. Joe Biden ain't got no place to put that either. He's just like Donald Trump on that.
They all
and
in
unless
that
you understand that's who you're dealing with, and that's why you do what you do, because it serves your interest. Because I will tell you, there's going to come a time, just like Mao and Chiang Kai-shek. This Japanese thing is just for a moment. But as soon as I get done with that, I'm going to resume kicking your ass, okay? Till I'm running this place. And Joe Biden, in this multiracial, multi-ethnic, urbanized coalition that America is becoming, old white guys like Joe Biden ain't got no place. All them mediocre, average white people who the only thing they got going for them is they white. The whole deal gets changed. Put it like this: if you Larry Bird, Jokic, or the boy down in Dallas, you don't care how many brothers are in the NBA, because can't none of them guard you. Okay. And they prove that every night. Okay.
every night.
But if you wanted them mediocre white boys who could play in the league that was 70% white, but they ain't gonna never make a team if we taking the best players regardless of. And brothers are getting a wake-up call, because Europeans can play basketball, and they all coming too. The Africans are coming. So we gonna be like white folks in about 20 years. Talking about I don't like basketball no more because ain't no Americans in it.
But like, even with that, Mike, part of that is, like staying in that basketball space, that we was willing to believe that, this was a bunch of cats from the hood, blah, that was the thing, that everybody was Isaiah Thomas. No,
right.
everybody not Isaiah Thomas. The thing can't work that way.
Right.
The numbers ain't gonna let it work that way, for the very reason that his story is remarkable.
Right.
Because it's remarkable, because that's like a 1 in a million. Oh no, it ain't. Well, what about him? Okay, so once you crunch them numbers, it's gonna come out to 1 in a million. And so And so we misread all of those things across, it don't matter what segment of society or like what industry, it don't matter. It looks the same across the piece. There's one Reginald Lewis, right? It's like, we keep finding all of this stuff, but it be one, it be two, there's one Kamala, whatever her name is. It's just one of her. And it's like, it's this is what it is, and this is the fight, and we got to understand the fight. And Larry, back to your question before, some, again, some uninformed person, I should, well, now he's telling us to be Republican. No, I'm only talking about the Republican Party because we're talking about Lincoln. That's it. I am not advocating for the Republican Party. Not about that. We ain't got time to go back and help you to understand
Charles,
in this show how we got from the Republican Party to the Democrats.
Charles,
But I am talking about our platform. Go ahead, brother.
Charles, to your point that you just made, if you brought Frederick Douglass from the 1870s to 2024 and say, who is that? Point at Joe Biden after he listened to Joe Biden talk and say, who is he? And Douglas would say, oh, hell, that's Abraham Lincoln.
That's Abraham Lincoln. And he ain't our guy.
Huh?
He would say the exact same thing. He's like, oh, that's Lincoln.
That's Lincoln. I know who he is. Right.
So I was wondering why I was here. I was wondering why you brought me here, but now I know.
Right.
That's it. And so, and again, Larry, that's the mental health. That's the mental health conversation for today, is reality testing. Can we understand where we are and why? And D. Mike Jones, he laid it out, because we strayed from the path.
Yes, we have. And the wine.
And we became drunk with the wine of the world.
And the wine of America is consumerism and everything else. And we think we can free ourselves with, by purchases and, respectability along those lines. And that ain't it. You can go to those schools, you can do the whole thing, but that's not it.
That ain't it.
Freedom looks different than that. And it is a full-time job. And that's where we need to be, placing all of our investment and all of us becoming free. Closing up, on this Memorial Day weekend, we certainly need to give our ancestors credit for coming up with this holiday in the first place. If one of you all want to go on a very, very brief description on how Memorial Day even came into play as we go out, I mean, that's another tidbit that we need to celebrate.
I would say that I don't agree with how we interpret the circumstance. And so, so yes, we were celebrating a theme, and we were celebrating our losses subsequent to the Civil War. But I don't think white folks started doing this and then it got to the point of being a national holiday because of us. And so we were doing our thing, giving, reverence and prayer to both the lost and to those families who stood, in the wake, as a result of, all of the Black folks who were lost during the war. But I don't really subscribe to that thought that this got to where it is because we started da 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 da. But
I would subscribe to Charles' way of thinking. They are contextually that they're related, but they ain't the same thing.
Ain't the same thing.
Neither is the 4th of July.
Right.
But
and Frederick Douglass would tell you about that one too.
Absolutely.
Why should I celebrate? Why should I celebrate your 4th of July?
right, right. That's the reference that I'm making. But I mean, I think it's important that we do note that our ancestors did, in fact, find meaning in celebrating and mourning those individuals.
Because
That
we are a godly and spiritual people.
that's it. And you
Which,
know,
which, which, which is why when you stray from the path, you, you create your own demise, and
you
that's
know,
what we've done.
that's correct. That's correct. And so, I mean, that's fascinating. So we look forward to getting more in depth into all things that the ancestors, sacrificed for. And, we may even have a conversation about predestination with this group at some point. Because that's certainly, that's certainly a backdrop, in my opinion, on a number of things that we're doing.
Which is also an African concept.
Yeah, so you guys have any closing statements as we wrap up this week's show?
No, we're gonna do this like Miles and them and kind of blue. We just gonna quit playing.
You're gonna walk off the stage. All right then. Well, that's it. Well, we want to thank
It's
you
so
for
what?
joining.
We just gonna quit playing. We get to the end of the song. We ain't got nothing else to say.
That's it. That's it. I think we've summed it up. Well, thank you all for joining. I thank you two gentlemen this week. And if it's Lord's will, we'll see you guys next week. Take care. This is signing off for the Level Set.
Indeed.